Convincing your ex versus triggering feelings. Discover his love once again. When you've shared a special connection with someone, it's hard to let it go. Especially when you know there's still a lot of potential if he would just open his heart again. You could build a beautiful life together. If that's something you want, then it's only natural you would try to convince him that he should give the relationship another shot. After all, convincing him feels like the right thing to do. Why would you not try to reason with him? Why wouldn't you try to show him he's making a mistake by pulling away? Yet this is one of those times in life when our instincts lead us awry. Because convincing your ex never works. Fortunately, I know something that does. Triggering feelings. Here's the thing, triggering feelings will always trump logical argument. Why? Because emotions run the show. We humans are not as rational as we'd like to believe. That's true of all forms of decision-making, but especially when it comes to matters of the heart. The easiest way for me to illustrate the difference between convincing your ex and triggering feelings is to offer you a simple list of do's and don'ts. So let's get right to it. Don't do this. Don't argue that he owes you an explanation since you know he still has feelings for you. Don't tell him the relationship was going just fine and then try to get him to own his share of the blame for why things began to fall apart. Don't imply he owes you something after all you've been through together. Don't tell him real relationships take work and he needs to grow up. Don't try to prove you shared something special by forcing him to acknowledge specific examples from your past. All that telling, convincing, and arguing will get you nowhere. In fact, it will simply reinforce the painful emotions that are driving him away from you in the first place. Why? Because his brain will automatically come up with counter-arguments. For example, if you tell him things were great in the past, he will immediately test the truth of that assertion by scanning his memories for contradictory evidence. He'll think of the fights, the frustrations, and other low points. He'll mention those problems. And this will reinforce your efforts to convince. You'll end up showing him your worst side. Angry. Desperate. And if that goes on too long, you'll become bitter, resentful, and maybe even sarcastic. You know it's true. This is how we all react when something matters to us deeply but the other person refuses to be convinced. This is not what I want for you to show him. Don't try to convince. Instead, let his emotions do the work for you. Do this. I'll explain each of these briefly after listing the techniques. Build a private line of communication. Use private flirting but not broadcast flirting. Be vulnerable about struggles interfering with your goals. Throw rocks at his enemies. Make time your servant.